My name is Pratima Singh. I'm a principal with the Americas Policy and Insights team at Economist Impact. And welcome to my two esteemed guests. We've got Mandy McReynolds from Workiva. She is the Chief Sustainability Officer and the Head of Global Environmental, Social, and Governance. And then we've got Mike Witt, who is Vice President and the Chief Sustainability Officer at Northrop Grumman. And as you can see, our discussion today is going to be on big data and the Chief Sustainability Officer. So listening to all of the discussions today and also over the last few days, and generally whenever we talk about sustainability, one of the things that comes up as a solution more than once, in fact, is technology and big data, right? How do we actually collect this information? What do we do with it? And how do we drive sustainable decision making? And so with that in mind, I kind of want to just turn to our esteemed guests here today. Of course, when we talk about big data, we've got all sorts of data. We've got structured, unstructured, semi-structured, and then you've also got a lot of other aspects to consider around the volume of this information, the velocity at which it's coming, the variety, what kind of information are you collecting. So it's a lot of complexity in this whole process. But your role, of course, is looking at sustainability and being able to drive data-driven decisions, because we know that's what's important as well in terms of making a big decision and differentiating your organization. So what I want to start with is a very broad question, I guess. As you're looking at your company, feel free to share examples as well. But how do CSOs, Chief Sustainability Officers, get their hands on data? What parts of the organization are they looking at? Are you looking across different organizations? But also, how do you get access to good quality data that allows you to make decisions about your company's future? So, Mandy, maybe I'll ask you to start.
I had the great privilege and honor to work in ESG for 15 years across different industries. And in financial services, we talked a lot about the quality of data in order to build investor-grade decisions. And I think you said it well. The first problem that we're addressing is a trust issue. At Workiva, through technology, we've done an investor survey both on the institutional side and individual side. And one of the biggest challenges is the trust. But then as we looked at people in our roles, in our jobs, I think one of the biggest concerns or fears, we just released a 1,300 survey of people in roles like ours around the world, saying their number one concern, 50% or more, is what I'm supplying to my stakeholders accurate and timely enough? And so we have to acknowledge first that there's a trust crumbling as well as a confidence crumbling. And the only way that I think we can attack it together is to really go back to the fundamentals of a good quality data strategy. And then secondly, what are the solutions? So it's two S's. Have a strong data strategy and have a strong solution system with technology that can guide it through that process. And welcome your additional thoughts, Mike.
Sure, Mandy, thank you. And Pratima, thank you for hosting this. Which I think is a really important conversation, because data, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, right? You can think you have a sound system that collects, assesses, organizes, and verifies data, or you may think you do not. And whether you are or whether you do or you do not, there are still opportunities to improve and work with partners. And so, very simply put, I believe our opportunity is collaboration. In my professional experience, I've worked in a number of different industries. I'm currently in aerospace and defense, where I work at Northrop Grumman, working alongside partners at Department of Defense, NASA, NOAA, and many others, where I can tell you, that I'm sure you can imagine, the amount of data that comes in on a minute-by-minute basis, let alone over a longer period of time. Working with these partners, the key word here is collaboration, because we have internal sources of information, we have external sources of information, and all this information is coming at us. Much like, and the way I like to describe it is, think of the warfighter and think of the individual being in theater and think of all these sources of information coming from drones or unmanned systems to manned systems to satellites to observations on the ground, and all that information coming together to tell a story, to advise and to give input so that decisions can be made very, very quickly. Well, inside our company and other companies that where I have worked alongside, whether it's chemical industry, oil and gas, consumer packaged goods, all this information is coming at you in a flurry. And so how do you address it? Well, you have to find good, solid, and trusting, credible partners. Once you find that, then you begin to, I guess, deassemble maybe what you thought was a logical assemblance of data, because that's how you can pick apart and you can pick out what you think is most relevant to the question that you're trying to answer. And so in working with these internal sources and external sources, this concept of collaboration is one that I believe is of utmost importance. Some examples that I could use, and think about this through the lens of a chief sustainability officer, as it relates to energy utilization, as it relates to land use, and some of the social components as it relates to employees and employee data. You know, Workiva, you're an expert in this, and you're from an organization that's a world leader in this space. And if we are going to make decisions to improve and optimize around the environmental impacts that we seek to minimize and ultimately eliminate, and the social opportunities that we want to maximize, we need to have confidence that the data that we are utilizing in making decisions on and around is of high quality and we believe is credible. So I'll end where I began on this C word of collaboration, and recognizing that you have internal stakeholders and sources of information, external stakeholders and sources of information. And frankly, it's your job, and it's a responsibility that I take on as Chief Sustainability Officer, working alongside our Chief Information Officer and many others in the company where I'm at, to ensure that all that comes together seamlessly. I say it like it's easy to happen, or make it easy to manage. It's not, but we've improved significantly, and I think we've put ourselves on a path to continuous improvement.
Yeah, there are some really interesting and important operative words here, right? Collaboration and stakeholders. And I think thinking about the different stakeholders that you're working with, and the way that you're enabling companies, and you're doing this yourself as well. So you also mentioned strategy. And so I'd like to kind of talk a little bit about that, which is, how do you collaborate within your supply chains, or when you're working with other organizations, to build that strategy, to build that aligned shared data strategy, so that when you're speaking to your suppliers, your other stakeholders, your customers, you're able to get all of that information, because at the end of the day, information is power. So you're collecting that information. How do you work to align that strategy with your suppliers and others?
Well, I think it's very key. We used to be competitiveness was how you build capital, and collaboration is how we build capital now. That's the difference. And so when we think about our stakeholders, it's really taking that holistic view into determining first, the D of data should be determine your business value drivers. If you haven't determined your business value drivers as a team, then you're really just chasing data for data's sake. After that, then it is, okay, we're going to assemble a team. And I think about, from your stakeholders, what's the determined business value? Are our board aligned? Are executives aligned? Then let's assemble that internal task force and team. And then going to the T, that's when you tackle the data through materiality assessment and determining the stakeholder engagement side of what is most important to measure. And then finally, that's when you get into the analytics and the fun of the KPIs. And so I use data as the way that is the acronym for how we think about it as a team. And first, it starts with, you can't chase everything. You chase what's going to add the business value drivers, and then you really get at it with your group.
Yeah, you have to prioritize that as well.
So I'd like to continue on this theme of collaboration and look at it through two slightly different lenses, but two lenses that I think need to come together. And from where we are in the value chain, working with both suppliers and the customer or customers. Because and the example that I'll use would be greenhouse gas scope 3 emissions. If I and we as a company and as an industry and as all of manufacturing are going to fully understand the inputs to a scope 3 emissions profile, and which we need to understand before we can inform ourselves of any decisions that we can make in order to positively impact that profile. I believe, and I think we would all agree, that working collaboratively upstream with your raw material suppliers and downstream with your customer is a good place to start. And why do I say that? Because you look at, for most companies and organizations, at least in the manufacturing community, the two largest sources of Scope 3 emissions are upstream raw material acquisition and procurement, and downstream, you can say product use or a product carbon footprint. And that collaboration needs to happen in a very true and robust way if you truly want to be in a position, again, to make a decision that can influence decisions that you're making that impact your supplier base, and decisions that you're making that impact the product that you're delivering to a customer who has said, I want product X, I want it on time, I want it under budget, but I also want and need these performance metrics to be met. And in our space, in aerospace and defense, as freedom-loving citizens, we really do want that performance to be met. But in addition to that, there are other decisions that we can make in that process of innovation and scaling up and commercialization that we can drive a lower emissions profile. But you can't do that in the absence of, or let me say it a different way, you must do it while having an awareness, a keen awareness of some of the inputs in that process. If you draw a circle around what you're doing and do what many of us call life cycle assessment, this can give you the opportunity to tease that out, work again with your suppliers and customers, focus on the decisions that can be made that can make a difference in that outcome, and then go forward from there. But it's really, I think it's this collaboration both upstream and downstream from wherever you sit in the value chain and whatever your industry you're in, there are opportunities for you to tease that out and make decisions based on that.
Yeah, I mean, we're working towards a circular economy, right? You have to be able to speak to all those individual parts and then really be able to feed back into it. Ed, any questions?
We have a question here on how do you reduce faulty assumptions or often saturated data sets from approximating a value direction that yields long-term growth over short-sighted gains?
I had a hard time
So
hearing that.
could you repeat that, please? So how do you make assumptions?
How do you reduce faulty assumptions on saturated data sets from approximating a value direction that yields long-term growth over short-sighted gains?
How do you reduce those assumptions and prioritize and basically look at long-term gains over short-term wins?
As a publicly traded company, and we are, we're graded every quarter, and what we are very careful to do is to share with our stakeholders, our shareholders, our investors, and all of our other, I mentioned, suppliers and customers, that we take a balanced view, and we want to make sure that the decisions we make that are driving the short term reflect the longer term North Star. And in the case of Northrop Grumman, our long-term North Star is net zero in our greenhouse gas emissions from our operations by 2035. That's a North Star that all 4 of our operating segments are working toward, and all of our enabling functions are working toward. There are short-term decisions that require data to help us understand what the here and now is, and getting back to this I hate to keep using the word, but it's the best word I can think of, collaboration.
Right.
It's the collaboration internally to ensure that that information that's coming in, if we suspect it, not that it would be intentionally be inaccurate, because I don't think that would be the case, but maybe there's a better question we can ask and get more relevant information to drive some of the short-term decisions, which then, we would drive then an alignment to that longer-term focus on what I'm referencing as a North Star would be. So it's a balance of near-term, long-term, understanding where you're going, and on occasion, whether it's quarterly or maybe even more frequently, doing that check along the way, ensuring that the data that you have are indicative of you and your organization being on that path.
I would say, building on that, I think when you look at bringing together in a collaborative technology environment the financial and non-financial data, you can to be able to do scenario modeling to determine what is going to be short-term, mid-term, or long-term decisions as you have that assembled team looking at it from all angles of your business. And then as you get closer to the other part that solution data does, and technology does, is it gets you to true sources of data and true sources of API technology technology and linking, where you can look at the commuting patterns of your employees based on zip code that comes from your HR data system, to the badge in data, which comes from another system, to, you keep going down the line. But that is true investor grade, board grade decision making that technology is enabling today, so that you can take that with confidence into your boardroom and say, okay, so let's talk about modeling right here, right now, live in our boardroom. If I eliminate, this part of our workforce to move to remote workforce, what does that do? And so those kinds of things, we can allow technology to help us do that. And then I think it's on us, as it migrates into financial reporting, to get vigilant on the same kinds of risk and controls that we've had for financial reporting for 100 years, and start to footnote with accuracy what's happening, so that our investors can make those true decisions.
And it's about sharing. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, that last point is really, really important as it relates to financial reporting. And now we're seeing kind of a dovetailing, or we're seeing in the financial reporting space what we've seen since the mid-2000s and 08, 09, Sarbanes-Oxley.
That's right.
And now with climate reporting and the SEC's recent proposal, and if you don't have your comments, and get them in soon, because you don't have much longer. And please make sure that that your views are shared. Yeah. We see that really coming together, and one has really influenced another, and I think that really speaks to what Mandy just said as it relates to accuracy, understanding what you have, its influence in the financial space, because climate risk is financial risk, as someone more famous than me has said quite a bit as of late. And that's where these two really come together, and I think it, again, speaks to the importance of data accuracy and verification.
Yeah, all feeds into business risk. Yes. Ed, any other questions? No? That's it? Okay, great. We do have 3 minutes, and I kind of want to end on a positive note. But just hear your thoughts around, you're on the ground, you're doing this every day. What are some of those current solutions, those really exciting opportunities that you're seeing through data in a way to be able to track assets real time, whether it's through land, real estate, EVs, any of that? What are some of those exciting data sets that you're seeing, using, or getting together to be able to make decisions?
I think what I've seen is I get the joy and privilege of doing the job day to day, and then I sit each week with an incredible UX team and solution engineering team. And so every problem that I experience and my colleagues experience and our customers experience, we can come to the table and say, how do we get better data validation? How do we get closer to the true data set? And the example of an employee commuting was simply me sitting with a solution engineer and saying, no, I don't want a survey that gives me assumptions. I want to get as close to the real deal as humanly possible, because guess what? If that's going to end up in financials, I'm accountable to the board. Yeah. Our CFO is accountable. That's an issue, and we got to solve that now. And so I think that's the exciting part for me, is seeing the ingenuity of our technology and where it's going to take us. And then I think the future is only bright as financial and non-financial collide more, because it will be beyond about risk. It will move to opportunity, and that's when it gets really exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, to pick up on that, which I fully agree with what Mandy just described, because there are, again, information coming at us as it relates to real estate and real property, personal property, or property that's owned at the organizational level, and information that can help us make better and more informed decisions as to how we could maintain, if not improve, the efficiencies upon which we're operating that organization. Being an engineer by training, I'm all about maximizing efficiency, whether it's walking from point A to point B, driving, or operating in a business sense. How is it that we can deliver the results? I mentioned the North Star earlier, the results of a team that helps the company align to a North Star most efficiently and most effectively. And so we're making decisions based on data that's coming at us, based on real estate that we currently own, real estate that we may or may not own in the future, individuals that have currently called Northrop Grumman home, or individuals that may call Northrop Grumman home, and what's their operational decision matrix that they're making, which is all data for, in this case, our human resources organization, so that we can better understand, again, how the next generation of thought leaders and decision makers, how they think about things differently than someone like myself, who graduated with my undergraduate degree in 1993. I'm very, very different than my oldest son, who graduated last year My second oldest is going to graduate this coming year, and then my third son is going to graduate in 2 years. The decision making, even between those three, I think is significantly different. And this is where data credibility, data validation, and verification is of utmost importance for us to make and optimize around our decisions in the business world.
And we have the opportunity, I think this was really well said from both Keurig, Dr. Pepper earlier, and Pepsi, is that you have the chance to pilot right now, like with the joint suppliers or with a customer. And great disclosure that's coming into the regulation realm with TCFD is about where you've been, where you are, and where you're going. So not getting afraid of being the hand raiser with your key suppliers and say, I don't need the whole group of 1,000. I need the two of us to get together. I need our city to get together. So I think as a team of people, we can be inspired to say the way we get data accuracy is raising our hand to be a part of a piloted solution with a small group of focused people, and that's where we're going to see future scale and progress.
Yeah, we need to be brave to be able to raise our hand and collaborate. And I think that's all the time we have today, but thank you so much, Mandy. Thank you, Mike. Very interesting to really get into how we're using data, because we always end up saying, we've got this data, we'll just use it and make decisions to improve our efficiency, to manage costs, but also where's the opportunity? And I think that's just going to be a bigger question going forward. So thank you, everyone. I'd like to invite Martin Koreg, my colleague at Economist Impact, to take us through the next session, but thanks for your attention.